Next curve.
Hey everyone, this is Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and this is the first in our new series, our Rethink webcast series entitled The State of Privacy and Trust. And I'm joined here by Debbie Reynolds of Debbie Reynolds Consulting LLC. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, happy to see you. Always fun to chat with you about cool technology data stuff.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's always a pleasure. And we always have really interesting conversations. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are joining us in this voyage in the world of privacy and trust, Debbie and I have done a number of podcasts and webinars, webcasts already. So you can check them out at the Next Curve YouTube channel. So just go to www.next-curve.com, go to our media center, and you'll find the links to the YouTube channel. And yeah, we've already had some really, really cool conversation that I think we'll probably riff off a number of those conversations that we've had in the past. But this episode, what we're going to focus on is the state of personal data protection and privacy, right? And here's the thing. I think we need to start off with you coming correct to our audience with what privacy is, because I've been getting into a lot of conversations lately. I don't know why it's lately, but people just seem to get privacy confused. I mean, it used to be with privacy and security. Now it's like privacy and publicity. They just don't seem to get it. What's the difference?
Yeah. So I don't know why people are talking about this. So you're like, another person asked me about this today, actually, but privacy and publicity are totally different. Privacy is about what you have the right not to share, and publicity is about what you have the right to share. And typically, publicity is around monetization. So like, like what I say, when a celebrity gets divorced, they say protect my privacy. They don't say protect my publicity, right? So that's the difference between the two. So privacy is a right that humans have to not share stuff. So depending on where you live, you either have more or less rights to not share.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is publicity.
Yes, right.
What we're doing is publicity.
That's
even
right.
though it's in my home, what I'm not doing is I'm in home office. I'm not sharing my life. That's privacy. And the choice that I'm making, not pointing the camera toward something that's personal because I don't want it to be shown, that is an exercise in my right of privacy, right? And yeah, and so by the way, congratulations on all the really cool engagements that you have with especially with regulatory agencies, and they're lucky to have you as an advisor and a guide to better understand the key challenges with privacy and the topic of privacy protection. Can you share with the audience what is the state? Are we seeing improvements in the state of personal data protection? Have we moved a lot since the introduction of GDPR, which is sort of seen as a sort of landmark event in the world of privacy?
Yeah, GDPR was an earthquake around the world because it brought in the idea of extraterritorial reach around people's privacy rights and fines. So that's what we're talking about. So privacy existed before GDPR. Privacy existed before computers, right? But that was the moment when people just really shook up. And since the GDPR came out in full force in 2018, jurisdictions around the world are exponentially growing in terms of having more laws and regulation around data protection. So the laws are rising around the place. In the US, we also have rising regulation in data privacy, but it's not in the area that people want. So what is happening is we're not. So other countries, they have country level or jurisdiction level laws, right, around privacy. In the US, we don't have that. So we don't have like an overarching US privacy anything, that's just a very right. So that's what we're lacking, but we do have like sector specific laws that have been on the books for a long time about like health and finance. And then we have states that are passing laws. And since 2018, when GDPR came out, a lot of the laws are being passed, sort of borrow snippets from GDPR. So it may have little bits and pieces of it. So if you know GDPR, you can sort of follow along with the general thinking of what's happening. But the big thing that businesses need to know is that you have to be transparent when you take people's data. The data doesn't belong to you, even though you have it in your possession. You can't keep it forever. And there may be situations where you have to get consent for data that you probably never had to do before.
Right. And that forces a pretty significant mindset shift, right? Because I think, especially in the world of digital marketing, and I think that's what GDPR is really in response to. That's not the way that folks were thinking. I mean, they knew, well, we probably should get consent, but there's nothing written in the law that required them to do that. And, in terms of business practices, there really weren't any, guardrails to speak of, right? And I mean, the way I looked at the GDPR is they were saying, the regulators there were saying, hey, look, there's entities that are doing things with personal data that may not necessarily be all that, beneficial to society, right? And it may actually be exploitative to a degree, right? So that's sort of the way that I took the EU's response to what they saw happening. And obviously, there were a lot of things that were triggering at the time this move toward driving GDPR into implementation, right?
Yeah, I think that we're at the end of days at business at all costs, right? So the problem with business at all costs is that it has come at the cost of the individual, and so the data is ours, right? It doesn't belong to the company. You're trying to provide me service, so why don't you do things to help me and not harm me, right? So why would you take my data and sell it and I don't know about it when that's not what I wanted, right? So it's really focusing more on what the individual wants, and companies have to think about how what they're doing benefits the individual, and that's like a very different idea. It's like, instead of like, companies are very good at figuring out how it benefits them, right? Collecting data, selling data, not that great at figuring out how their data handling benefits the individual.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has really been driven. I mean, so I worked in the Silicon Valley in the early days of .com, and there were a number of companies, a few actually, that really started this whole it's called website personalization craze. This is about 2000, right? It was about 1998, actually, around that time frame. So there were companies like Broadvision, ATG that were basically providing platforms to companies to build these websites, commerce websites that could use data about visitors to personalize content, right? Because back then you can either, and even today, you can visit a site and interact with the content as an unregistered, anonymous user, right? Or you could sign up and then have a profile. You put a profile together and then drive some personalization, or even configure and customize the experience for yourself, right? And so that's all kind of exploded and morphed over the years. And, we've seen the search engine companies, as we called them back then, adopt these models to bring about these highly targeted advertising models, right? Advertising platforms. And I think this obsession with data, it has kind of driven a lot of this what's I think become a problem.
Yeah, I think that's to say lightly. Yeah, it's very much a problem. So the issue is, let's say someone comes in your house and takes something, right?
Yeah.
So you be like, someone broke into my house. You call the cops. You do, all this other type of stuff. But what if someone took something and you didn't know that they took it?
Yeah.
Or they took something that belongs to you and they sold it to someone else. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the fact that the internet makes it very easy for companies to glean insights from people and find out stuff about people, they found that stuff was valuable and they wanted to sell it to other people. So that is kind of the reason why we have a lot more laws around transparency, consent, not just notice, and then also not keeping stuff, because if you keep stuff too long, you're probably going to use it for some other purpose that maybe you shouldn't be doing.
Right. And so as far as the mindset, because you work with a lot of companies, as you've already said, you also are working with regulators. Do you see notable momentum toward increased personal data protection and sort of this adoption of like what you and I've kind of dubbed the privacy first mentality?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's not, this is not like a hearts and minds change. This is definitely a bottom line change. And that's fine with me as long as the change happens, right?
Yes.
So what we're seeing is that a lot of companies are putting into their contracts, especially around third parties, is like, hey, if we have obligations, then you have to help us with our obligation, even if these laws don't apply to you. So, they're coming down really hard on third parties. They're kicking people out of their, vendor programs. And they feel like they can't answer these questions about how they handle sensitive data, how they handle private data, personal data, what's their data retention, what are their plans. So they're really getting strict there. So in a way, I feel like the regulation, especially on the larger companies, they're really pushing that downstream.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, hey, you know what? This is all the time we have for this installment of our series. So to our audience, hope you found the session informative and interesting. And so remember to follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find the link at our research portal, www.next-curve.com. Also, make sure to follow Debbie Reynolds, the Data Diva, at www.debbiereynoldsconsulting.com. And we will see you in the next installment where we are going to focus on the regulatory landscape. We'll delve a little bit more into detail about that and the key shifts that we see happening and think that should happen going forward. So until then, we will see you later. Take care, all.
Take care.